Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TechGig webinar. Thank you for joining the session today. The topic of today's talk is IoT based vehicle vibration prediction using RNN. It will be a 1 hour session with around 40 to 45 minutes for the presentation and the remaining time for the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please send them to us using the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. I am Sukriti, the moderator of this session, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our guest speakers, Software Development Cell of VIT Chennai, Dr. Pradeep Kumar TS, Deputy Director, and Dr. Suganya G, Assistant Director. Dr. Pradeep Kumar holds a PhD in power modeling of IoT and conducted more than 90 programs across the country on IoT, wireless networks, simulations, etc. Our second guest speaker, Dr. Suganya, holds a PhD in software engineering and conducted programs on Python, machine learning, etc. So without any further delay, let me introduce you to our guest speakers. Over to you, Pradeep.
Yeah, good afternoon, friends. So today's topic will be on IoT-based vehicle vibration prediction. Actually, this is two part of work we have done in VIT last year in 2019. We have used to predict the lifetime of the road, and we want to use the speed violation of the vehicles and any vibrations happens in the tires, in the vehicle tires. So this is what our work we have initially purposed for. And since my research work is also on power modeling, so we have taken the power history, power profile of all the sensor modes and the IoT devices. So that's how this is started. So since machine learning up gearing up, so we thought of why can't we extend this to this neural networks model or deep learning model. So that's how we have pitched in Dr. Suganya into this session. So now over to this session. This IoT-based vehicle vibration prediction using neural networks. The overview of this session will be introduction to IoT, IoT-layered architecture, system model and experimental setup, mode configuration, data collection analysis, and RNN model. So this is how our session will go. So up to this data collection analysis, I will be dealing with it. So after the RNN model, Dr. Suganya will take over, and she will just explain you about how this data set have been modeled using deep learning models. So as you all know that IoT is an extension of internet connectivity into physical devices and everyday objects. So even right from whatever we use, right from the morning to the night, whatever equipments we use, those who are not having, those who are all just non-living things or any objects that we use every day, they have a connectivity of internet. So that's how we call it as Internet of Things. But what we need for Internet of Things? So because earlier we were talking about sensor networks, so now we are extension of sensor networks become Internet of Things. So we need these 4 parameters this for sensors. So first thing is we need a sensing device. So sensors, it could be passive sensor or active sensors. So some sensors need power, some sensor doesn't need power. So we need these sensors. And in this example, in this experimentation, we have done, we have a sensor that has temperature, accelerometer, then a magnetometer, and a microphone, and a sound acoustic actuator. So this is what we were using in this sensor. And connectivity, so surely all the sensor nodes need to have connection between them. So we have connectivity, we should have connectivity. So the easiest connectivity is our Wi-Fi. So we have any Wi-Fi but Wi-Fi takes slightly huge space and a huge data requirements. So instead of Wi-Fi, we have other like Bluetooth Low Energy BLE and Zigbee and IEEE 802.15.4 wireless personal area networks. So like that, we have so many connectivity options available. So the second thing, foremost thing is the connectivity. Third thing is the data processing. So data processing, when we deal with data processing, there are 2 types. One is online, another is offline data processing. So online data processing means as and when the actions or events happening, we try to process it. But in this experimentation, we do everything offline processing because the vehicles are moving. So we have collected the data for a particular day for 24 hours. At the end of 24 hours, we have collected the data and then we go for analysis using this particular model. But now next work also we are planning now is the on-the-fly model. That means as and when the action events are happening, we predict. So based on some deep learning model. So currently under research, we are doing it. Finally, we should have a user interface. So gone are the days that user interface we only use browser based, but now we have browser based, mobile app based, and not only that, we have in the top application layer of the network, we have Node.js, we have React.js, AngularJS. So there are so many scripting languages also coming to picture now. So we have a lot of user interfaces now available, and there is a separate research area for these user interfaces. So provided all these things, we can able to get the hardware of this IoT devices ready. But what we need the most is this layered architecture. So we can see here, right from the bottommost layer is, so usually IoT have this wireless personal area network as a physical layer. So mainly 95% of the IoT networks across the globe, they have the physical layer of IEEE 802.15.4. So this is a wireless personal area network. So the branded name we call it as Zigbee protocol. So it's a branded one, but if it's non-branded thing, we call it as 802.15.4. So which establishes a network connectivity between the personal area, a small area of network. So that's how we use it. Next thing is above this layer we have medium access control layer. So who controls the medium and who have access to the medium. So there are I have 10 nodes there. So how many modes or how many nodes need to have access to it, and how many nodes on what speed they need to get access. So therefore that again we use this IEEE 802.15.4. Above that we have adaptation layer. So this adaptation layer is a very big topic. I already given a talk sometime back from 4 years back in same TechGeek. I'll give the particular details also, so you can refer that for this complete 6LoWPAN. And network layer. So in the network layer we have IP version 6 and ICMP version 6. So as you all know that we all still this day we are using IP version 4 in our most of our networking, but IoT demands IP version 6. The reason being IP version 4 is already over, so we cannot scale up IP version 4 still now. So we need more addresses. So for those more addresses, we cannot rely on IP version 4. Obviously, we go for IP version 6. Now, for a small glimpse, so IP version 6, the packet size of IP version 6 is 1280 bytes. So that means almost 1000 bytes, 1000 plus bytes. Whereas this physical layer, it can able to handle only 127 bytes. That is just 127 bytes. Here it is 1280 bytes, and here it is 127 bytes. Suppose, for example, the entire IP version 6 also will be converted into small packets and will be sent via the wireless personal area networks. So in that case, how it is possible? So for that only we have the 6LoWPAN layer. The 6LoWPAN will have a adaptation layer that compresses and decompresses the packets from IPv6 and send it to the bottommost layers. So that's how this entire IoT gets worked. So if feeling that sensor networks and IoT, the main difference is the 6LoWPAN. Sensor network may not be having 6LoWPAN, but IoT must have 6LoWPAN. The main reason is the IPv6 addressing. Earlier, sensor networks were addressed using node numbers, node 0, node 1, node 2, node 3, like that it was addressed. But now we are addressing everything through IPv6. Then above this network layer, we have transport layer. So as usual, will be using transport layer of user datagram protocol and routing protocol for low power lossy networks. It's a new kind of protocol comes up here. So it is something like a dynamic data structure. So it's like a tree based or a graph based. It's a protocol. So this protocol is running with a low power rating, but that gets a good performance when compared to the UDP protocol. So that's how this transport layer. Then finally, in the application layer, we have some protocols. Usually in the application layer, we usually deal with HTTP protocol, hypertext transfer protocol. But hypertext transfer protocol, again, the header size is very bulky. So that means more than 256 bytes. It's a bulky size. We don't need for IoT, we don't need such a huge data header rate. So for that, we have to go for a scaled down HTTP protocol. So one kind of scaled down HTTP protocol is CoAP. So constrained application protocol. So that means everything on a constrained mode. This CoAP is on a request response model. So if a client give a request, the server will be responding. Similar like how a HTTP works, the same way CoAP works. Whereas the other way around is MQTT, message queue telemetry transport. So this protocol, what it does is it does the publish subscribe model. Like we subscribe to clients are subscribing to a particular things or entities. Whenever it is being published, they get the news. They get the news feed or anything. So that's how this MQTT works. So there are different kind of application layer protocols available in IoT. So why I'm just giving you this slide is, so whenever when you deal with IoT, so without understanding this layered architecture, we cannot go further. So that's the purpose that I have just brought into this. So in case if you are interested, in case if you are already, if you want to know more about it, I already gave a webinar on Internet of Things and 6LoWPAN in same TechGeek. So the link is already available. You can visit there and then you can check for more details. So I have given elaborate details on how to do this, how to do the simulation, all these stuff I have given it here. You can use that. So now the system model. So how I design this entire system. So actually we have so many mathematical models also there, but we thought within 40 minutes we could not cover the almost entire stretch of it. So we have taken only the glimpse of what we have done it. Okay. So in the right hand side we have base station. In the middle way we have relay nodes, and in the sensor nodes is the nodes which are scanning the environment. Okay. So these nodes are the one that who scans the accelerometer, temperature, all these sensors. Please see that each sensor node cannot talk to each other. So in the other way around, the sensor nodes can talk to only to the relay nodes. So it's a kind of a design that we have created. So most of the sensor, whatever the sensors can talk to themselves to each other. But in our development stage, because we wanted to give an energy efficient IoT framework, so that's why instead of making the sensors to talk, because usually what happens is most of the energy is drained only because when the sensors talk to themselves. So we thought of avoiding it, so that's why we have given it. And these sensor nodes talk to their relay nodes. So the relay nodes are placed slightly away from those sensor nodes, and they just talk to the relay nodes. But the relay nodes can able to talk to each other, because here see the count the number of sensor nodes here. Totally there are 11 sensor nodes are there. If 11 sensor nodes talk to each other, what could be the power rating, power occupation? Whereas only here there are only 5 nodes which are talking to each other. So we thought that this 11 will be consuming more power and the 5 will be consuming less power. So that's why we have given a relay nodes here. So relay means they relay the packets collected from the sensor nodes. Finally, they send to the base station. So we have for demonstration I have given 4 base stations. So in our application we used only one base station which is connected to the internet. So all relay nodes and sensor nodes, they are not connected to internet, but only the base station gets connected to the internet. So the sensor nodes collects data, send it to the relay nodes. Relay nodes in turn, they just do the normalization, because more than one relay node will get the same data. So they normalize it, then send it to the base station. So this is how our design works. Now that's what I have mentioned here. Sensor nodes can talk only to the relay nodes. Relay nodes can talk to other relay nodes and also to the base station nodes. Whereas base station nodes can connect to the cloud and the internet for storage of sensing data. So the base station will be having the internet, and if any data will be stored in the cloud also, it will be happen only at the base station nodes. All the nodes are non-mobile. So because of wireless personal area and WPAN, wireless personal area networks, usually the nodes are non-mobile. So mainly you can see that most of the Internet of Things sensor network applications, usually the nodes are not mobile. Mostly the targets are mobile, have mobile. The targets may be having mobility, but the nodes will never have mobility usually. But there are some applications wherein we have the mobile sensor nodes also. Okay. But in our application demands that our nodes are stationary. We'll be staying at a particular location. And entire framework is a connected graph. So connected graph means entire network is connected with the graph. So if any one network fails or the battery get drained, automatically the other nodes will take care. So in this example, you can see that if this relay node fails, then automatically these other 2 relay nodes will take care. And if these relay nodes fail, automatically the other relay nodes will take care. And here in the sensor nodes also, there are 2 sensor nodes reporting to one relay node. So one of the sensor node, if this relay node gets failed, these 2 sensors will send the data to the other relay nodes. So that's how we have coded the particular application. So entire things was coded in 2 different languages. So one is TinyOS. MicroZ modes with TinyOS were used with simple data processing. So we use 2 different type of coding. One is on TinyOS, another is on proto threads. So that is a stackless threads. So we have defined a new application without using any stack memory. We use it again to avoid the over computation and over power usage. Recently, we use ZZ1 Solatium modes with the machine learning libraries to predict the data. So this is what we will be projecting now. But the experimentation what we have shown will be shown for MicroZ. But recently we use the Zolatia modes here. So these are all miniature days. So even they are just half of the size of a credit card. These modes, the entire modes comes with the size of more than the half of the size of a credit card or debit card given in the country. So that's how these modes were used and how the nodes were deployed. So the full power rating of the node is 1000 milliwatts. So completely, if the node is running to full load capacity, the rating is just only 1 watts. So we have used only simple small 2 AA size battery, AA batteries. So you would have used these batteries in the remote control of your television or something. The same battery we were using it here, so that how we can optimize, or we can able to recharge, or we can able to replace the batteries once the energy is drained. Total number of sensor nodes we used 4. Relay nodes we used 2. So because so even a single sensor node was costing around more than 35,000 in INR. So we have procured only 4 sensor nodes, and among the 4 sensor nodes, 2 we have, apart from 4, we have given 2 relay nodes, and there was only 1 base station. I will show you the picture of it, how it was looking like. Mesh formation is 2 seconds for sensor nodes and relay nodes, whereas 1 minute for base station. So here, this is where we are just trying to see the optimization here. 2 seconds mesh formation means every 2 seconds the sensor can able to trace the environment. So every 2 seconds. So that means that every 2 seconds, whenever there's an event happening, the sensor records it. So since we have deployed 4 sensors, so even if one vehicle crosses, one vehicle or any two-wheeler or a four-wheeler or a truck or a car or a bus, if anything crosses, if whenever any of the sensor is on, they will try to get the data that the event will be triggered, and the sensor senses the data and report it to the relay nodes. So that's how we have programmed it. So all the 4 sensor, four sensor nodes were starting at a different timing. So all the 4 may not be starting at the same 0 time. So they have started at a different timing, so that to avoid the conflicts. Whereas the base station is 1 minute. So 1 minute for the base station, because base station is always on. It will be keep on servicing the other sensor nodes. So but further what we did is 1 minute for base station we have given. That is to prolong the battery. So sometimes what happens is we can sit in the room and make the base station to run all the time by kind of plugging it to the USB port. But most of the time what happens, we will be carrying the base station near the application. So one example is we were in a state highway. So in the state highway we don't have any infrastructure there to make our nodes to stay. So what we did is we carry our own machine, we carry this laptop, we carry this gateway node, and we sat there. So in that case, we wanted to give 1 minute for base station to have the prolonged battery level. Now this is how our modes looks like. So this is the Mica C modes. So maybe in future we'll be giving the Zolatia modes also, how we program the Zolatia modes. Already we have done the programming, we just to test it. Now here this is the base station. So you can see the base station, it has a USB port. So this can be connected to any laptop or any desktop machine, and this will collect data from it. So this have a range of 900 meters, the line of sight. So that means even the sensors can be placed almost more than half kilometer away from it. Still it can able to get the signal, but only thing is it should be in the line of sight. And this is the radio board. So the radio board is on 802.15.4. So that means that the Zigbee radio board, so this is radio board, and behind this radio board we have the battery, the 2 WHS battery can be placed over here. And this is the sensor board. So the onboard sensor with the 5 sensors. So we have light, temperature, acoustic actuators, seismic vibrators. So seismic is nothing but accelerometers, double axis accelerometer, x-axis and the y-axis. And we have magnetometer. So magnetometer is for magnetic anomaly detection. So again, that also this sensor board has. So what we usually do is we can see the white strip here. So this white strip is patched with this white strip, so that the sensor data can be recorded or sent via this radio. So this radio is 802.15.4. So we don't need to have any Wi-Fi for transmitting the data. That will be taken care by this base station, because base station is already connected to a laptop or a desktop. So that's why this will be connected to the base station, and these two will be transmitting the data. The range is 150 meters line of sight. So they are in 150 meters. So that means without line of sight, they will be around 50 meters or just only 100 meters. So that's what we have used these modes. So these modes, actually the relay nodes also part of the same modes, but only thing is we have done the separate programming for relay nodes, and we have done the separate programming for the sensor nodes, because the design of sensor node is they should not communicate to themselves. They have to communicate only to the relay nodes. So for the relay nodes, we call it them as parent nodes. Then next thing is, so this is how the setup we have done. So we have recorded a video also. So maybe the video size is very huge, that's why I could not show it here. So what we did is these two modes are placed over here, and the other side of the road we have placed 2 different sensors. So 2 different sensors, and near there's a bus stop there. So near the bus stop we have waiting with the gateway node. So initially we placed these 2 sensors on the floor, on the ground, but we could not get the vibration. So that's why what we did, we used a carton box there. Above the carton box, we have just placed these 2 sensors. So whenever any two-wheeler also, when it goes near, we have more vibration. When it goes far away, we have less vibrations. And sometime in a four-wheeler goes, we have a different kind of vibration. When a car goes, we have a different vibration. So like that, we have counted so many vibrations based on the accelerometer reading. So usually the accelerometer captures the x-axis and the y-axis violation. So x-axis means how the vibration in the x-axis happens. Y-axis means how the sensor node jumps. That's the y-axis. That's how we got it. So we got very good readings there, and we were collecting this in the month of April last year. And in a hot sun, we were doing it mainly for around 8 to 9 hours. The working time we have taken, and on various days we have collected data on a Saturday, on a Sunday, on a weekday, and during the evenings and during the mornings, the peak time, off peak time. So we have collected data on various things. Our main purpose is on the accelerometer. So that's how we have done the experimental. And here period of sensing. So usually the one period of sensing what we demonstrate here is just 24 hours of sensing that we have done it here. So we did not show the entire record of it, just only 24 hours of what we have collected on a particular day that we have shown. Sensors used were 2-axis accelerometer, magnetometer, acoustic actuator, and temperature. So acoustic actuator means based on some sound you can actuate the sensor. So sensor board, it has an actuator as well as a sensor. Actuator means it's a kind of triggering. So when you clap, it will switch on something. When you say hi, it will be sending a message or something like that. So that's what we call acoustic actuator. And 2-axis accelerometer and magnetometer. So using acoustic, what we have done is whenever the vehicle crosses, so usually we have taken the experimentation opposite to our university VIT Chennai. Whenever any vehicle crosses, they just give a horn, sound a horn. So when they give the horn, that will be categorized as acoustic. So we have done some actuation inside. So we have got an alert message. So how many of them violate the honking? So whether they really need to honk when they cross a particular institution or educational institution. So that kind of violation also we can able to get from this acoustic actuator, and we have collected it. Sensing interval, as I already told you, that 2 seconds per sensor nodes and 1 minute per base station nodes. And power rating is so full load 1000 milliwatts, that is 1 watts. And sleep mode, so when the entire node is going to sleep mode, we have just it consume only 10 milliwatts. In the idle mode, it consumes 250 milliwatts. Idle mode means it never do any processing or anything. It just sits idle, but it is in the listening mode. So in that case, it consumes around 250 milliwatts. So that's how this mode configuration that we have configured. And this is the raw data we have collected. So raw data in this sense here is what is the raw data? You can see that the date is 9/4/2019. So exactly last year, today is 9/4/2020. It's coincidental dates. So the ID is, this is a node ID. So node ID is 1. So this ID on which day, which time, and node ID 4 and node ID 1. So we have taken only first few lines of the data. So we cannot show you the entire data in a sheet, Excel sheet. That's why. And the parent is the relay nodes. So these are the relay nodes. So they belong to 2 different parents. So node number 1 belongs to parent 1. Node number 4 belongs to the relay node number 2. So likewise, we have collected. And see, the readings are in some whole numbers. So this number indicates that actually we are trying to get all the values from analog values, but most of the values are storing digitally. So we have taken the value of the ADC, analog to digital converter. After this data, raw data, we have to convert into our own readable data as per the sensor. So as per the sensor node, we have modified this into processed data. So you can see here, the same here, temperature 31, 18, 31, 20 degree, 31, 24. So 31 degrees is fine, but 18 degree and 20 degree, actually we have placed 2 sensors in a, in the cool enclosure, in the coolant enclosure. It's inside our air conditioned building to see whether how far they are from the gateway node or for the base station node. So 2 sensors were in the road, and remaining 2 sensors are on the air conditioned enclosure. So that's how this value is shown. And acceleration, you can see we have 2 kinds of acceleration, x-axis and y-axis. So you can see here the minus 1.49 indicates that it is on the left hand side, in the x-axis on the left hand side. That means the sensor vibrates underneath. 4.4 is on the y-axis. You can see that the sensor just moved a bit up. So because of when any vehicle moves over there. Actually, we have found that this application will be helping. This sensor will be helpful for vibration analysis of any hanging bridges. So in India there are hanging bridges in Calcutta, in Allahabad, and there are some places that we have hanging bridges. So underneath the bridge, when we place these sensors, they can get the vibrations of the hanging bridges. So we have found out this kind of application we can do at a very cheaper rate. And we have found out the voltage values also, how much the voltage is sustained by this particular sensor node. At the end of the day, what was the voltage? So we have calculated the power also. At the end of the day, what happens? So based on these data, this is for the process data. So usually this process data we done manually. So manually means from this raw data, we have a formula for each and every sensor mode according to the ADC formula. Using the ADC calculation, we convert this into our own processed data. So that's how we just do the process data. After that, so initially when we were doing it, so we have mainly worked on only for the power analysis. So we were concentrating only on this data, not on the other data. But since after the machine learning, deep learning models have come into picture, so we thought, why can't we get some prediction, or why can't we do some time series analysis or something like that? So that's how we just went for the next roundup of thing. So in the analysis here, two-axis accelerometers were used to collect the vibration exerted by the vehicles on the road. So mainly in entire world, when the vehicles when they go travel on the road, so there are so many vibration, they exert so much of vibrations in the cement road or in the tar road, in kind of road where there is no proper infrastructure road. So everywhere, how this accelerometers helps in understanding the road behavior. So even if you want to relay the road, so how often we just relay, or any patchwork we have to do, how often we can able to do. So all these things we can able to do. Here the issue here is the minimum speed limit is 15 km/h to collect the sensor reading. So actually we have tried near our campus gate also. The campus gate, what happens is there is a speed breaker. So most of the vehicles, when they enter the campus, they reduce the speed less than 15 kilometers. So in that case, we could not able to get any vibration from the vehicles. So obviously we need more speed to get the vibration. That's why we went for a highways. So usually we prefer to go for a national highway, but we have locked down ourselves to a state highway. The experiment was carried out in Bandalu Kelambakam Road in April 2019. The sensors were positioned at least 3 kilometers away from a speed breaker to collect the exact vibration exerted by the vehicles. So why this reason is, even if the speed breaker is just 1 kilometer away from the place where we collected the readings, the vehicle will be reducing their speed, and by the time they reach the sensor area, the speed may not be very high speed or very nominal speed in which the vehicles were traveling. So that's why what we felt is we have to fix the sensor in such a way that the nearest speed breaker is just at least 3 kilometers away from the placement of the sensor. So that's how we have done it. But even if 1 kilometer, if less than 1 kilometer, there is any speed breaker, the vehicles will be reduced their speed while they encounter a speed breaker. After that, the speed will be very nominal. So we could not able to find out what was the real actual speed the drivers were driving the vehicles. So that's how we have used the 3 kilometers. So the source code were written in NESC language. So that's how we have used NESC, Network Embedded System C programming language, for real deployment and proto simulation. So we have done the simulation also here. So simulation is again we use Contiki OS, Contiki operating system. We have done the complete simulation. We have done the coding in proto threading. So this again C programming with the proto threading. That's what we did it. The data that are recorded were stored in PostgreSQL. So the entire database was stored in the PostgreSQL. That's an open source database. The sensitive data values were taken directly from the unlock to digital converter. So as I already pointed out that we got only the raw values. It is at the reading at the ADC. So after that we processed it to our requirement. So now what kind of sample use cases that we can do with the collected data? So condition of the road, some sample cases we can use condition of the road, life of the road for relaying. So if it is let's say for example 3 years over, now the vibration is more, in that case then we can think of to relay the road. We can give to the municipality or the corporation that how often the road can be relayed. So this is not only suitable for the Indian roads, it could be suitable for the manufacturing sectors also, because they run roads inside their campuses or inside their units. So there also we can have these kind of vibrations. And speed violation. So speed violation, mostly people they use some kind of handheld devices. The police, traffic police will be using handheld devices for speed violation. But this will be a good mechanism wherein they can able to find out what really is the reason behind the speed violation. See, sometimes what happens is because of some braking or brake issues or any breakdown, the speed violation might be there. So we can able to find out very easily with the help of the sensor data. Okay, so that's how my part of this IoT, the experimentation, all this stuff is done. So now I just give this to my colleague, Dr. G. Sukanya, for handling the RNN models. Over to Sukanya.
Hello. Thank you, Pradeep, and hope all the audience would have got a clear understanding of how the data is being collected and it is being stored for further processing. Actually, as Pradeep has discussed, some of the use cases have been listed out on screen. One could be the identification of condition of the road based on whatever data we have collected. And next could be to identify the life of the road so that we can go formally on the time period on which the relaying has to be exactly done. Third, speed violation in the sense it could be observed on different means, like if we could identify the patterns on the vibrations that is happening for a time period on a time series data, we can able to identify the speed violation and at what time period is it happening, due to what kind of vehicles is it happening. Because if you look at our road on which we have carried out this testing, during the time period of 4:30 to 5, there will be a lot of buses moving on, be it the college bus, school bus, or the IT company vehicles move on. Obviously, the vibration would be much more, and that could be one of the possible methodology to identify whether any speed violation is happening or not. Having taken into these use cases, these are all completely our point of view, but the use cases must be many more according to somebody's research perspective. So we thought, why can't we use this collected data using machine learning or deep learning? That's why we ended up with this. And the data set what we have collected has been gone through this pre-processing activities. First, the conversion of raw data to actual values, which Pradeep has explained. So that was actually carried out. And next stage, we went on for data cleaning. So data cleaning in the sense, as it is all made from the data is being collected from physical sensors, there is obviously a possibility that there will be loss of data at some point of time, which cannot be accepted while we move on for further processing. So we have used filling up identification of missing values, and we have tried filling up using different methodologies like the mean mode and filling up with zero and other things. Second is, it's not always that we have collected so many parameters out of the sensor, and it's a fact that not everything could be of use. So there are existing methodologies in machine learning and deep learning, which we call as feature selection and feature reduction. Feature reduction we normally apply when we feel like all the features are important, and hence we move down to a narrow down the features to a particular one or two samples. In contrast to that, feature selection is that if we can start with bottom up or top down, wherein we can completely trim down the unwanted features, and in order to end up with the important features that we consider is more important for further thing. Here, in our case, we have identified only 4 parameters, and we have taken it for feature selection. One is the temperature, voltage, and the acceleration in both x direction as well as the y direction. So having identified the important features, the next step what we have moved on is the data correction. Why we have gone for this is, again, physical sensors end up with recording on, sometimes it is like recording only the hours and the minute, not the seconds. But as you have listened on the previous lecture, it is that the data is being collected for every 2 seconds, and that particular seconds also needs to be recorded when we say it is a time series data. Actually, it was missing somehow, and hence we have corrected it in order to accommodate those things. Then we went of normalization. So this normalization is completely carried out to standardize all the values. Then grouping or clustering is done on ID basis, right? So because the IDs, that is the sensors, are given with ID numbers from 1 to 4, and hence we have grouped the data according to that. So having performed all these pre-processing activities, this is what we have ended up with the same data after pre-processing. This is some portion of data that I'm showing you. And altogether, we have got around the 56,000 data initially. And all those things have been pre-processed and made it ready for further processing. So once it is done, we went for selection of model. Why is it important to select a model? Because data is available everywhere, and we too have ended up with collecting some data, but without getting a proper information from the data which we have collected, and without adding a business value to it, the data collection won't be of use. In which sense, we are obviously in need of a model to retrieve some information out of this data. So we went for selection of model, and we listed out some of the few models which can suit this. One is feed-forward neural network, convolutional, recurrent neural network, and long short-term neural networks. And with that, convolutional neural network have been striped off because it was convenient enough for computer vision, and we went for a complete mapping between the feed forward and the recurrent neural network, and we ended up with this kind of comparison. So feed forward, if we look at, the inputs are given to the hidden layer. We can have any number of hidden layers in which the output of one hidden layer is always given as an input to another hidden layer, and from that hidden layer it will move on till the output, and the output doesn't have any kind of correlation with the input. That is, if we feel like the outputs are not pretty good and we ended up with loss of accuracy, we'll backtrack and we will back propagate, adjusting the weights from output layer till your input layer. That is what is actually happening in feed forward. So it is acyclic in the sense that only forward flow is allowed, and using the research that we have seen, we could able to identify that this feed forward neural network is completely useful for classification or regression, since it doesn't have any memory and we don't have any way of identifying what the path that we have crossed on, because always the output is depending on the previous hidden layer. So we went for researching about or learning about the recurrent neural network, wherein the problem of completely hiding the output from the input has been striped off by sending a feedback to the same node itself. So here what happens, actually the node will compute an output. Taking an input, the node will try to compute an output at a particular point t, which is again given as a feedback to the same node while moving on to the time t+1. And hence, because in most of the cases, if you look at the output at time period t+1 is always dependent on the output as t+t. So you could see a lot of examples in for this recurrent neural network. For example, the language statement processing. That is, you can start creating any number of statements depending on yours. In the same way, what we did is we are able to map this recurrent neural network with whatever we have seen on the data. Our data is also time series data, and the vibration details that is there available on a particular time period mostly depends on the previous time period. Let's say the vibration on 5 p.m. at a particular day depends on the previous time period. So, and hence we came to understand that recurrent neural network would be the possible right choice for our model. And I have given a simple example. This I think people would know. Loss function, that is this z is equal to is what is the function that will be carried out in the nodes, neurons. So actually the input xi will be multiplied with the weight wi, which talks about the impact, and all those such nodes will be summed up, and b talks about the bias of the entire system. So this is the formula that will be, this is the operation that will be computed at each and every node, and the value of z is the output of the neuron, which will be passed to an activation function. So actually in all the neural network, in the activation function that is used on a particular hidden nodes could be anything, be like sigmoidal and then hyperbolic tangent function, or nowadays rectified linear unit ReLU is being used, and different kinds of variation of ReLU like leaky ReLU is being used. And for calculating the loss or the error, we used root mean square error function, whereas E is equal to square root of their computation, the actual minus the predicted, the whole square. So that is what is the loss function. It is also used in RNN. So this is what RNN, after unfolding the RNN, this is what it means to. So here the concept is that the weights are not different among different cells, rather it is the same among that. So that is the biggest advantage of RNN. So back propagation becomes very easier in case of this RNN. So at time x0, your input will be taken and it will be fed to the corresponding node. There the computation is happening, and it gives you an output called h0, which is given as an input along with the input x1 for the next time period. That's how it move on till the last time period. So adjusting the inputs on a time series basis. And this is the structure of an RNN actually, wherein when we expand a particular node at time period, ht is the output of the node at the particular time period, xt is its input. It takes input from its previous node also, which is ht minus 1. Internally, it applies hyperbolic tangential activation function, which will return a value between -1 to 1, which is more convenient for us to get to reach things. So but the biggest problem with RNN is that what we found is it in many researchers have talked about it. It is exposed to vanishing gradient and exploding gradient, meaning that when the weights, say if you reach the last time period of propagating the output, and if the weights are too small, when you want to back propagate the result, you won't have any change in weights, and hence you'll end up with a problem. Similarly, if the weights are too large also, there will be much more variation on your previous time period, which is a biggest problem in RNN. So in order to avoid this, we moved on for the next model, which has given us a very good result for us, that is the application of long short-term memory model to our data set. Okay, so it's just a variation of RNN, in which case is that it supports some few nodes called forget cell, new memory cell, and output cell. In every terminology, there's a name of the cells might be different, but the functionalities remain same. This forget node, actually what it does, it will try to, so before that I'll just explain what the components of it. Xt refers to the input at time period t, ht-1 refers to the output of your previous cells, neuron, right? So ci minus t-1 refers to the memory component of it, meaning that at every cell or every node we try to identify the important features that needs to be carried out over the cell propagation, and hence we remember it in ct-1. So now what we do, the system will try to find out whether ct-1 has to be taken out of the cell or not, and hence the multiplier unit is given. When the output of the first sigmoidal function is 0, obviously when the multiplier unit gives you 0, and hence your previous memory will be lost, meaning that it is not that much important. If the sigmoidal values near to 1, it means the values has to be propagated thereafter. Then the next thing is we are going to construct a new memory that is going to be passed on to the from this particular cell. Okay, so that is being taken on using a addition summation cell, wherein this memory which is carried over from the forget cell and this new computation unit has been given, and the summation of that, the previous memory and the new memory will be taken up, and it will be given as a memory output to the next unit. Similarly, the output is being computed. So this is the defined architecture of LSTM, and this is how we have created an LSTM nodes. Okay, so this LSTM node takes two parameters, actually 3, but by syntax it is 3. So the number of hidden nodes that we want to have on a layer, actually we tried with 25, 50, 100, 150 and so on. So, and the input shape, that is, it takes two parameters. One is the timestamp. Timestamp refers to the time period on which we are in need of the next output. Let's say I might have taken, we might have taken the data from the sensors in 2 seconds time period, but it's not always the fact that we are in needing 2 time series as the output. I might be in need of 1 minute. So accordingly, I can calculate the time step. And the input dimension is the number of inputs that we want to pass on to the model. Actually, having passed this, an LSTM model will get trained, and when we are using Keras, batch size will always be taken care of by it, so we don't need to bother about it. And we have implemented this in Jupyter Notebook using Pandas, NumPy, sklearn, and PyPlot for plotting the graph. TensorFlow and Keras are used mainly for implementing this LSTM. And the optimizer, what we have used is Adam, but so many are available. We can use this optimizer. Function of the optimizer is to state what is the learning rate. Learning rate is more important. It is as usual like your multilayer perceptron or other neural nets. So it states on what proportion the weights has to be altered. Okay. Similarly, other parameters are part of this optimizer. So stochastic gradient descent is there, ADA, delta, grad, a lot of optimizers depending on however we want we can use. The loss is calculated using root mean square error function. In our case, we have calculated using that because we feel like that is the most appropriate error function that we could. Rest of the things I have given. And since MSE is the lossy calculation that we have used, I have used metric accuracy as my metric. Accordingly, depending on what we are trying to find out, we can use. And a sample of what we have tried and what is the output we have given. We have run around 100 epochs on the data set, and this is the result of training as well as testing. Finally, after near to 40 above itself, there is a loss gets reduced and it becomes standardized, and we ended up with a good model. And we found root mean square error, and which we end up in 1.7, which we feel like is the most efficient methodology. Okay, so this is purely our heuristic approach of what we could find out using that. So after having found out these set of data, we went on finding out the life of the row using the statistical computation that is available. That is one way that we have ended up with a business value for what we have collected. Okay. Rest is all on your research perspective and research side. Okay. So if you have any queries on that, it might be addressed to TS Pradeep Kumar or myself, Suganya ji. Hope all you are safe and at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep and Dr. Suganya, for this empowering session today. There are so many questions for you. They're displaying in the questions panel. I would request you both to have a look at it and respond.
Okay. So there is a question from Nityanandam that what is the minimum configuration for base station? So base station, actually the base station what we are using is just only 64 kilobytes of RAM. So it's and a strong ARM processor. ARM processor, we have a model called strong ARM, just 133 megahertz processing power. So that is a base station minimum configuration. So it's not minimum, so because base station will be keep on most of the time it will be running. So you can give the power alone through USB. So in that case, you can handle it. And what is the purpose of having relay nodes communicating within relay nodes? So actually the main purpose is to minimize the total network power, because in IoT networks, if the first node dies, that will be the end of the network. So what we have planned is instead of making the sensor node because sensor node, as per the framework, I showed only 11 nodes. But for an application, if you deploy 100 nodes, even if one node talks to each other, it takes 1 milliwatts. Then you just think about 100 nodes will be 100 milliwatts. So it will be a very huge power rating, and the battery will be draining very fast. So only for this purpose, we use the relay nodes. So even for these 100 nodes, we can have only 5 relay nodes. So that's how these relay nodes, that's why we make it communicating with the other relay nodes.
Okay.
Then do you poll for live dead node sensors? What is the duration? So actually we didn't do that because our purpose is on it's a though it's a real world application, but we never tried with any dead battery, or we never poll it for any dead nodes, because we ensure that the node is always up with some power. So that's why we could not do that. But anyway, it's a good question. So maybe in our future work we will be including this.
Okay, there is a question from Praveen regarding the feature selection methodology. Actually, in our case, our application is more specific, and we haven't gone for any feature selection inbuilt methodology. We went for manual selection, but of course, filter method could also be used. So that is one question, most prominent question. And Abhishek has asked whether we can use MATLAB for RNN. Yes, of course you can use, but we feel like Python is more convenient since it is an open source. So, but of course, the support for RNN is available in MATLAB.
Okay, so there is one question. Why didn't you use GSM or LTE model in data link? Okay, so it's a very valid question. But actually what happens is, since we have tested this network near opposite to our campus, it's on a state highway. So we don't need any new network to transmit our data. But actually initially we were trying that using a simple GPRS module. So using a GPRS modem, we have tried it. So the GPRS we have tried it. We were successful in getting it because I was sitting in my office just 200 meters away from the place where the sensor was located. But later point of time, either the GPRS was malfunctioning or our sensor could not able to send the data to us. So that's why we could not make it any trial and error. So we went directly to the spot, and then we were waiting with our gateway nodes. So, but LTE and GSM also can be used with a simple modem. We can purchase a GSM modem. We can able to do that. So that is possible.
Okay, and Praveen has raised one more question asking whether how do you try to avoid the overfitting in the model? Actually, LSTM takes care of by itself. So why the main reason why we moved on to LSTM rather than the multi-layer perceptron or RNN is that so it takes care of overfitting by the way of adjusting, or that is why that forget cell came into existence. It tries to strip out the unwanted memories and hence it removes overfitting. And one more question to you, Pradeep. What is communication between sensor node and relay node from Gopi?
Yeah. So sensor node and relay node communication is simply again it's a PAN communication only. So the relay nodes are programmed with the PAN coordinator. So usually in ZigBee network, so we usually have a PAN coordinator, personal area network coordinator. So all the relay nodes were programmed with the PAN coordinator. So the sensor nodes, once they have the data ready, so similar like another sensor node, they simply communicate. They will, instead of sensor node, they communicate to the relay node. So just only a PAN coordinator. So that's how we have established the connectivity. Okay, so then what is the programming language to fetch the data from sensors? Actually, we use the NESC language only. So we usually C programming only we used, whether it is a proto thread or it is a real world application, we used C programming for getting the data between the devices.
And there was a question from Pranav. Due to connectivity issues, they were not able to listen, it seems. Hope Pranav, I hope it is available in TechGig. Am I right, Sukriti?
Yes, the recorded session will be, Dr. Sukanya, the recorded session will be available post this webinar, but I have already shared the link of the previous webinar that was taken by Dr. Pradeep earlier. So there might be some problem that might be occurring from the user end, right?
Yeah.
That's
what people have.
Okay.
I hope we have answered the questions most probably.
And there's one final question answered by Abhishek Bhattacharya. Like what kind of data will be noted when by relay when any vehicle passes from the relay? See, usually the PAN coordinator they usually don't sense. So actually PAN coordinator they don't have any sensor board with it. They have only a radio board. So that being said, they don't sense. So even if any vehicle pass through the relay nodes, so they do not sense because they don't have any sensing board within them. Instead, they have only the radio board. So that is one method to minimize the power there for the relay nodes. So relay nodes, they do not sense. They just only use a radio. So they just only transmit a transmitter and a receiver. So they don't sense.
Okay, we hope we have answered the audience questions. Thank you very much for all the enthusiastic audience over here. We thank VIT Chennai for giving us a wonderful opportunity to share our experience of what we have encountered. Hope this would be taken as a research project for most of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pradeep and Dr. Suganya, for this really empowering and motivating session today. I would also like to thank all our participants for making this webinar a great success. This session has been recorded and the recording will soon be available on techgeek.com. Thank you everyone for joining us.